This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 119.
Welcome to We the SEs Podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramzi Majaba.
What's up, SE Nation? Welcome back to another episode. I am your host, Ramzi Marjaba, or otherwise known as Ramzi Lies Naim Khalil Musa Khalil Marjaba. If you want to. So in Lebanon, we don't have a middle name. And by the way, my co-host Benny's here, and I immediately went into telling him the story. He's waving.
That's okay.
We don't have a middle name. We just use my your dad's name as the middle name.
Right. I've heard that. Yes.
So my dad's name is Elias. So I made it a thing, and I just put in the entire. I asked my grandparents what their great grandparents' name was, and now I have everybody's name in my like Ramzi Elias Naim Khalil Musa Khalil Marjaba. There you go.
Very cool. Is that mostly like for fun, or is that part of your official name, like to have?
No. My official name is Ramzi Marjaba. So if anyone wants to steal my identity, please don't do that. But yeah, my name is Ramzi Marjaba, and my dad's name, Elias, and then Naim. Yeah, nobody can say these words in English, anyways. But
there's always a pronunciation. That is interesting. I mean, I don't mean to get into this topic too much, but it's a cultural thing. But like, my parents from India. We don't have middle names. Just I don't have a middle name. My brother doesn't either. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Sorry.
Isn't your middle name Ayak?
Bin Nayak. No, yeah. I wish. Or actually, I don't wish. But no.
No, it's good. All right, man. So we have a great show ahead of us, and we have a repeat guest along with a new guest. So Chris White is a good friend of the show. He introduced me to Scott from Ales with Aslan. I did a podcast with him where he interviewed me and Chris. So it was, I don't know, like I feel like this was one of those interviews where we're just friends, like with Scott and Chris. It didn't feel like an interview. It just felt like a conversation between four friends.
100%. Yeah, these guys, like, especially, like, I think we already have a good dynamic. Like you said, Chris, too, a good friend of the show. He's been on a whole bunch. I think we have a great dynamic with him as well. Then Scott and Chris, man, they're closer friends than I could have ever imagined. It definitely helped, such a natural flow. Everything about it was something else.
Yeah, no, it was great. And we talk about a lot of, other than like it being a friendly conversation, we talk about a lot of important things, in my opinion, like OCS, which we'll explain more on the show, dropping the rope, putting others first, serving. So yeah, there's a lot of content in there. And as much as I want to prolong my conversation with you, Benny, we're going to jump into the show right after a request from me. This show is sponsored by Ramzi Marjaba of We the SEs. So if you haven't left a rating or review, please do so. If you think these shows are useful to anybody, let people know about it. I think that's the main thing. We're trying to grow this as much as possible to affect as many lives as possible, especially right now with everything going on. So help us help other people. I think that's the goal of this podcast been from day one, just helping as many people as we can while selfishly helping ourselves. Sounds about fair? Sounds about right? Sounds fair?
Yeah, a little bit of both, I think.
Yeah. Let's jump into the show. Hey, Scott. How's it going?
Hey, it's good. Good. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Well, thanks for being here. Unlike some other people who are just disappeared all of a sudden.
Just a ghost. What happened to that guy?
I mean, we counted 3, 2, 1, and bam, Chris White
just disappeared.
Well, it is pretty common, for people who are in sales engineering or otherwise. People miss calls, there's prospects missing in action sometimes. So just par for the course, I suppose.
It happens. It happens. It's easier to happen during COVID because, you're just on a screen. You're not actually in the room together.
This is true.
So while we're waiting for Chris to do whatever it is that he's going to do, we will not disclose that live on air.
Please.
We're not live, but we won't disclose it on air. Maybe you can introduce yourself.
Sure. Yeah. Scott Cassidy from Aslan Training and Development. And we are a sales training company, been around since 1996, started out in inside selling. Our founders were, running an outsourced inside sales company that most of the people were starting to ask them, if you're so good at this, why don't you just train our inside sales reps? And so a company was born in 1996 that specialized there, and since grown the breadth of our offer to 11 different offers. We've focused heavily on sales reps, but also sales leaders. And like I said, been helping some of the largest companies around the world, some of the biggest airlines you've heard of, from a customer service perspective, to some of the largest finance firms, and just really excited to be here and kind of share some of our thoughts around the relationships between account executives, system engineers, and really sales leaders as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that, Scott. Hey, Chris, welcome back.
Thank you, guys. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we
You
were
look
telling
much
the
better.
folks-
Thanks for joining.
We're telling the folks at home how we counted down 3, 2, 1, and you just disappeared, and now you're back.
Poof.
I'm back.
You are back, but you've been here before. How many times? 3 times so far. Yeah.
I have been. This is my 4th appearance on this fantastic show.
Like, you're breaking your own record. So you've been here on show 95, 99, and you were one of the panelists on show 100.
True.
So you're a good friend of the show, and
I'm delighted to have that recognition. So,
for those who missed those 3 episodes, you should go back and watch it. But maybe you can do a brief intro to you, and how do you and Scott know each other?
I'll be delighted to do so. My name is, again, it's Chris White, and I'm reasonably well known for a book I published about a little over a year ago called The 6 Habits of Highly Effective Sales Engineers. And I run and Scott happens to have a copy in his hand, apparently.
A pre-release copy, by the way.
Yeah, and
I don't have my new one yet.
He's got a version that still has a number of typos and things that were edited out. And I run a sales training company called Demo Doctor, and I happen to be a certified Aslan instructor as well. I think Scott mentioned Aslan. And Scott and I were actually high school buddies. So he and I have known each other for, well, that's 35, 36, maybe 37 years.
That's right.
And we were in the senior superlatives. We were voted best friends in the yearbook.
That's right.
And interestingly, we sort of lost touch for quite a few years. Over a period of years, but reconnected a couple of years ago, discovered that we were in very similar lines of work, and have not only reignited the friendship, but also have become very close working colleagues as well. So it's a delight to have the opportunity to be on your show with Scott.
Well,
very cool.
Pleasure to have you guys here. Now, I have a request. Can you send me that picture of your yearbook voting to be in the
if I can find it, I most certainly will. I'm sure I've got it somewhere. So I think it's he and I doing some sort of Run DMC thing like that.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, you know what? On second thoughts, never mind.
That should be the thumbnail for this one, actually. That'd be an amazing.
It could be. We might even have the one side by side of 1986 with that reunion a couple of years ago. I think I can dig that out.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Scott, you're the marketing guy. You own that.
I will put it on the show notes. This is show 119, so people can find it there. But question for Chris: why would a sales engineer, or like right now, sales engineer trainer, do a sales methodology certification? How would that benefit?
Yeah, it's actually an important question, Ramsey. And I'm even gonna answer a different question first, and then I'm gonna answer your question. The first question I'm gonna answer is, why would a sales engineer not do a sales training program? And one of the things that I tell and say to a number of the folks that I'm working with is that the reality is that a lot of sales training does not work for sales engineers, because a lot of sales training focuses on things that sales engineers, either it's not part of their job or they don't recognize it as being part of their job, right? So, the hardcore prospecting, certainly cold calling is not part of what a sales engineer does. They typically don't get into negotiating. They typically aren't the ones that have to go knock on doors and opening doors, right? So I think I'm finding that a lot of companies are are, you know, are struggling to understand why their sales engineers aren't sort of more comfortable and better at sales when they've sent them through sales training. And the answer is because sales training falls on deaf ears. Now, why? Now, let me answer your question. Why do I think sales engineers should go through some sales training, and in particular, Aslan? And by no means is this intended to be obviously a commercial. But I do think, and we've talked about this, I think when I've been on your show, I mean, sales engineers are fundamentally we're engineers by trade. Like, we're naturally engineers. And I'm the first one to raise my hand. When I first got into the role, I didn't even think of myself as being in sales, right? So we have to come to peace with the fact that we're in sales. And Aslan, and I'll let Scott, you know, elaborate a little bit. Aslan is based on a foundation they call OCS, which is other-centered selling. And frankly, the foundation of their model actually takes the sort of the ugly part or the distasteful part of selling out of selling, right? And really, sales is all about, you know, there's this notion of servant leadership. The term that I've been starting to use is servant salesmanship, right? It's really all about how can we best serve our customers. And I think for those of us who are sales engineers who struggle with the idea that we're in sales, I think if we develop that mindset, then that makes us much better in our role. And I believe that certainly programs like Aslan and others help sales engineers come to peace with that. So long-winded answer, but hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Well, obviously, you picked Aslan for, like, you did the certification. You did it for a reason.
Yeah.
So that would be its own commercial, I guess, or own sponsorship from your end.
Yeah,
pretty warranted at the same time, though, I would say, in that, you know, a lot of people coming into the sales roles, it could be super uncomfortable jumping in and really selling, or there's a what's the word offhand? I can't quite think of it, but there's a connotation perhaps to being a salesman, right? That a lot of people who I think go into engineering, and I'll admit I'm not an engineer myself, but I'm not necessarily the most comfortable salesperson either. There's something that is kind of maybe distasteful about it. And so to have a type of training that kind of opens one's eyes up to how, you know, it doesn't have to be all about what you hear about I don't know, some like car salesman or something like that, to know that it really can be something where you really are helping and providing value and servicing one in your job. And you also just happen to be doing sales and maybe doing it in a very well way or a very good way. That's super powerful. So there is something that's quite important or quite cool about that way of framing it.
I think it's interesting because I think sales does have a negative connotation that, you know, whether it's, you know, the proverbial used car sales approach, you know, what's it going to take to put you in this car today kind of a scenario, and yet you have no real interest in serving the customer or helping them buy the right car. You just have an interest in, you know, solving your own financial problem and put some commission in. And so they get this reputation of commission breath, that they're just, everything that comes out of their mouth is with the intention of putting money in their own pocket. And so that's an unfortunate reality. But what we kind of talk about, and I think what's important to think about if you're in the sales profession or not, is that all of us have to influence people to survive in this world. We have to convince people of our point of view. We have to, you know, help people understand a different way of thinking. That in turn puts an onus on us to also understand other people's points of view. And so we talk about this concept of other-centered an awful lot. It's sort of laced throughout, foundationally throughout anything we talk about. And the idea of first, you know, which habit is it, Chris, in Covey's book? Seek first to understand, right? So if I do that, if I seek first to understand the other person's point of view, then I am more likely going to be able to express my point of view, and then I will be able to potentially influence them. And so whether you're a salesperson or not, you do have to influence people to get your job done, whether it's internal to your company, whether it's with your spouse, or whether it's with your church. You have to be able to influence people. And you know, this other-centered approach will work better than anything else I've seen.
That's actually super powerful coming from well, obviously from both of you. But Scott, if you don't mind me maybe quickly honing in on your background a little bit, You've had quite the career in sales, worked at quite a few notable companies from, say, Eastman Kodak, Schneider Electric, what many know now as PTC. And you obviously have held quite a few roles, quite a number of leadership roles and perhaps otherwise. So this idea of really understanding the importance of proper communication and maybe being able to disseminate how to really provide value across teams is particularly important. So I just want, the listeners to kind of have that context in their mind to know that this is a guy that has really been around the block and, really, I think we'll probably have both seen the consequences, and Chris as well, realistically, have both seen the consequences of miscommunication across teams, which is something that we'll definitely dive into, I'm sure, as well.
Well, and to just take it even a step further, and this isn't on any resume anywhere, but my wife and I have been teaching pre-Cana at our church for 20 years. And the subject matter on which we're experts is communication as the cornerstone of your marriage. And so to me, this idea of other-centered communication, of putting someone else's needs before your own, whether it's in a marital relationship, in a sibling relationship, in a parental relationship, or in a corporate environment is absolutely paramount to long-term and sustained success and successful relationships.
So if you're talking to a salesperson or an SE who's been used to focusing on themselves, what they want to sell, how can we shift their mindset from I want to sell to I want to serve, and hopefully that will bear fruit?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, and Chris and I debate, talk about this all the time. We won't even say debate it. We're completely in line with this. It starts with trying to understand what problem their customer's trying to solve. If you start from a position of I am here to help you solve a problem versus I am here to sell you something, it's a different relationship. First of all, trust can build almost immediately because at the end of the day, remember I mentioned in our prep, we have this concept of drop the rope, right? So if I throw Chris a rope and he and I are both tugging on it, conceptually, that's gonna create a combative type of relationship. But if I drop the rope and say, Chris, I realize that a lot of salespeople are probably proposing things to you, and I have no idea if what I have is of any use to you at all. But what I do know is I talk to customers every day, and a lot of them find that if they take a few of these steps, that they can actually improve in this particular area of a problem. Now I've set the table with saying, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to sell you anything, but if you let me ask you a few questions, we can figure that out. And if I can't help you, at least maybe I can direct you to someone in our industry that can. And so, wow, what a different and refreshing approach that would be, right? That's what a probably 80% of account executives and probably even a higher percentage of system engineers don't do properly. They don't start with what's the customer problem we're trying to solve. They start with what can I sell you?
This is interesting because this is bringing to mind. I had in a previous organization, I had a salesperson. I really enjoyed working with him. Great guy. I could tell like he cares. But one of the customers said he's too salesy, mainly because he asked the question after we were done, like a 2-hour meeting, we were solving their problems. At the end, what else do you guys need? What else do you guys need? What else do you guys need?
Right.
And like, caring, I guess, but it came off as if he's looking for more business. What more business can you give me? And I feel like that made the shift in the customer's mind. So it's very interesting what you just said compared to that.
Well, and what's interesting is if you do that at the right part of the sales cycle, if you're in a discovery type of scenario, and instead of going, oh my gosh, he just said he wants to buy something, we're always afraid of talking ourselves out of the sale by talking too much, but an inquisitive person's never going to talk themselves out of a sale because they're just trying to do what's in the best interest of the customer and understand the holistic problem, right? So I can remember a company where one of my compadres was selling an internet service or a web building service to build your website for you. And the company had been acquired. And so after she had kind of gotten the company to buy in on fixing this little small part of the website, she just kept asking questions about, but how's that going to affect the larger website? So let's just take my example. Let's just say APC, which was a small entity inside of Schneider Electric. If I was going to solve their website problem, great. But then I start asking questions about what Schneider Electric's website going to do over the next couple of years. And by asking just a few more questions, she took like a $30,000 deal and turned it into like a $300,000 deal, because she was able to get the right people in the room to start going, oh my God, you're right. We're gonna have the same problem with the macro site that we do with the micro site. Yeah. So just by being inquisitive, not thinking about herself, but thinking how they're going to solve their bigger problem, because that's how she's wired. And that's how she acts.
Well, and if I may, and I'll lead the witness a little bit, but there's the fundamental difference between the example that you just gave, Scott, and the example that Ramsey gave, right, is not necessarily the questions that were asked, but, and I'll steal a little bit of your thunder, but in Scott's scenario, the customer believed that they were the priority, right? And that's our, you know, the difference is, right, is if I said, what else do you need? Yeah. Right? If, you know, who's the priority there? Well, I'm the priority, right? I'm just asking because I'm trying to figure out what else I can sell you, right? But if it's asked in such a way that I'm sincerely asking because I'm still putting you the priority, and the customer feels that way, they're going to be much more open to that part of the conversation, and they'll feel they're much more or less likely to feel like, okay, now he or she is just being a salesperson.
Yeah, and not to give everything out of the program away, but you're exactly right. When you talk about dropping the rope, it's for the two P's, the two reasons. You want to relieve any pressure. The customer cannot feel pressure because they will not act if they feel pressure, and they have to believe they're the priority. So great point in bringing that up, Chris, because it's so important that the customer feel no pressure and feel their priority before they will trust and potentially be receptive to your recommendations that you ultimately will make. Sorry, Ramsey, I'll cut you off.
No, it's all good. This is your show. You get to talk whenever you want. Just let me know. It's interesting because when I was in the room, I didn't feel anything wrong with him asking that question.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm in it, right? I'm not digesting what's happening, whatever. Since I moved companies, I'm still working with the same customer. He said that. He told me that it came off as salesy, and I've been racking my brain why, and I just found out why. One question was out of sincerity, out of helping the customer. The other one was out of trying to get more business out of it.
Mm. Exactly.
Benny had a note that he.
Yeah, I mean, I love everything, Chris, everything you just mentioned there. I was going to say that, I mean, just having that habit of it being inquisitive is a good habit to have. In fact, you might even say that it could be taken right out of your book, where, if I'm not mistaken, to be able to probe is one of the 6 habits of a very highly effective sales engineer. So to be able to be inquisitive, probe about those questions, but remember that you're not coming from a point of just, filling your own pockets. You're really probing with the purpose to help the people that you're trying to sell to. And I mean, sorry, I shouldn't even say you're trying to sell to. It's almost a byproduct of what you're doing, this fact that you're selling to them, but you're really just trying to help them with what they're trying to solve with the solution that you can deliver to them. So yeah, I really love that idea, but just being inquisitive and you're not coming from a bad place. You're coming from a pretty, as a sales engineer, you're coming from a place of wanting to help people.
Yeah. Well, and make no mistake, I tell this to people all the time, make no mistake. I mean, our job is to sell. I mean, let's be very clear about that, right? I mean, that's what our job is to do. But, and it, it's so interesting. And Ramsey, I'm going to go back to something you just said, because I was running a workshop last week, and we had both SEs and AEs on, in the group. And it was a very poignant moment, because one of the AEs basically shared that, in fact, I think it was an SE who had been an AE, and he started out as an SE, got into more the pure selling role, and after 3 years went back to being an SE. And he said something very interesting. He said, I got tired of feeling like everything that I was saying was being doubted or questioned because I'm the salesperson. And I was no longer being given the benefit of the doubt, whereas I get the benefit of the doubt as the SE. And I think for SEs, that's an important thing for us to remember, right? Our sales counterparts actually have a more difficult time convincing prospects and customers that they're being sincere than we do, right? And as an AE, that's something that we have to just accept, that, like, people are going to assume commission breath unless we make it very, very clear that, look, we're sincerely here to make your objectives, your requirements, right, your needs the priority. And we're really trying, we're really we need to demonstrate that we're not going to put pressure. So, but I just thought that was really interesting that he came back to being an SE because he was tired of not being basically trusted.
And you know what? It's interesting because we talk about this in our workshops, and even when we're selling this stuff, that you just cannot fake this stuff. You cannot fake being other-centered. You can't pretend. Motive is transparent, right? People ultimately see through people that don't really care about them. And if you truly prove, COVID has been this amazing opportunity for sales reps to do this. And those that did this well will reap the benefits for years to come. Like, I knew nobody was going to buy from me the last 3 or 4 months, right? And I sell for this company. I run all of marketing for this company. So I've got several hats that I wear. I run the channel portion that Chris is a part of, and the partnerships and so on and so forth. So I get to deal with all kinds of people, and I knew no one was going to be sending me checks for the last 3 or 4 months, but that did not stop me from writing as much as I could and finding other third-party, assessments and quizzes and tests and checklists and things that could help customers, software, third-party, solutions that could be helpful, that were free, that would help people maintain their business during the downturn. If sales reps were doing that during the downturn, they're gonna reap the benefits because they're gonna have trust with those prospects and clients. You need to have that attitude all the time. It's not just a COVID thing, right? It's I am trying to help you as a prospect, as a customer, be successful. And people are going to go, you're full of donkey dust. That is not how salespeople are. And you got to prove them different. You got to be different than everybody else. And by the way, as products become commoditized, the only thing that's different from company to company is the people. Yep. And so you've got to make sure that that's clear to them who you are and what you do.
I did a video maybe a month back. When Corona started, everybody started talking about lead with empathy. And in my mind, it's like, what have you been doing so far?
That's great.
Why did it change all of a sudden that now you're leading with empathy?
Yeah.
They will not recognize that. So yeah.
It's like, start with washing your hands. Like, remember the guy down in Florida, Chris? Yeah. If we weren't washing our hands before, I'm worried about this entire crowd. I hope you've always been washing your hands.
Yeah.
Now we just got to wash them every minute.
Exactly.
Maybe ask a quick question. So, I mean, obviously, leading with empathy is something that hopefully people are doing already in many respects. Kind of that last point, but for those that maybe, or rather, for those that other-centered communication, rather, if that's something new to some people, but it is a mindset that they're going to need to not only implement now, but implement forever in the future as well. What are some things they might want to be careful about maybe doing it too much, or are there any maybe pitfalls that could be fallen into, or easy mistakes that they could make when they try to make this transition to other-centered communication if they've never really thought that way before?
Yeah, I mean, to me, there is no downside to shifting your mindset completely to being an other-centered person. Where I think you're going is, how fake does it sound in the beginning as I'm trying to make this transition? Right. Try it out on your spouse. Try it out on your best friend. Try it out on other humans. Because to me, I mean, with what's going on in the world today, and we just literally put a blog up about an hour ago about this, but, everybody's on opposite sides of the political spectrum. Everybody's on, we've got issues with civil rights. Everybody's diametrically opposed on, the planet warming or global warming. We have so many things that we can disagree about. But if you truly want to see a better world tomorrow than what we have today, it's going to take people like us just being other-centered and saying, Chris, I really want to understand why you feel the way you do about this election coming up. Can you just tell me why you're so dyed-in-the-wool on your candidate? And let me just understand that. Because, I was talking to my daughter not too long ago. I mean, she is so opposite me politically. I can't even believe we're from the same bloodline. I mean, I can't believe she came from my bloodline. However, I said, explain it to me, right? And I gave her this one quick story. I became a vegan 2.5 years ago. I don't eat meat anymore. I don't eat any dairy anymore. Now, I was the biggest meat eater you have ever met. I used to melt Velveeta cheese and put meat in it and eat chips all. I was so unhealthy. And she came to me 2.5 years ago and said, Daddy, do you want to be around to see your great grandkids? What'd she just do? She put an other-centered, she put a word picture in front of me. Do you see yourself with great grandkids? She made me think about what's the emotional payoff for me if I take this action she's about to unleash on me of becoming a vegan. Before I even knew what she was going to ask me, I was buckled up for, oh boy, what's coming next, right? And so she really sort of, I was able to really listen and then watch the videos that she wanted me to watch and look at the documents that she wanted me to look at. And then eventually, what did she close me for? A 2-week challenge. Just do 2 weeks as a vegan and see what happens. And I lost 16 pounds in 2 weeks, and I went, this is pretty cool. I'm going to keep going. And so my whole point of all that is she didn't try to sell me on something. She gave me a vision of what the end game might be. You're going to live longer and you're going to see your great grandkids. And she said, here's a vehicle that may help you get there. Eat healthier. We can do that in every argument we're ever in, just by understanding where the other person's coming from. That's my whole point.
I love that. I remember, I haven't had too long of a career myself necessarily, but back in, I guess, one of my earlier jobs, I was running a win-loss program for a software company. And many parts of that had me speaking to, well, obviously a lot of lost prospects. And some of them were pretty hard on, or maybe a little tougher individuals that weren't the happiest with our company, whether it be from us maybe not providing them with the best experience, or otherwise just maybe having a better relationship with another with another company or another vendor. And I remember some of the most distinct experiences I had there was when I'd speak to a particularly tough person, when I really took the time to understand, where they were coming from, what our shortfalls were, and kind of just put myself in their brain. Those people were my favorite people to speak to, because they were actually the most forthcoming about what it was that caused them to go with someone else or otherwise to leave us. And it was so cool to know that, if I wasn't even being fake about it. It was really cool to recognize that if they recognize that I actually care about what they have to say and cared about their decision-making process, and I wasn't coming from a place of bias, that they're willing to actually, have a conversation with me and disclose to me some pretty interesting things. So yeah, no, it's definitely a very effective way. And also congratulations on losing the 16 pounds and staying with it too, as, being a mediator, or just, loving food or animal products in many respects.
Yeah.
And just cutting yourself off right after that. That's a huge shift. Congratulations.
Well, and thank you. And it's interesting. There's 2 words we use in a lot of what we talk about, that if you use these words, and I don't mean this as like, in sort of a whiny way, but if you use the words because you, when you're ever trying to get someone to take some action, when you're trying to influence them, because you said you want to see your great grandkids, Dad, I want to show you a way that you may be able to ensure that by eating a better diet, right? Because you said you need to save money in your IT department, Mr. Customer, I want to show you a couple ways that our product may do that. Because you is such a powerful way. It does 2 things. It shows you were listening, that you cared enough to listen, and now you've cared enough to internalize it and apply it to what you're going to make your recommendation. And so we use that sort of philosophy, the because you philosophy, for no lack of a better term. The marketing guys should be stronger with that. But yeah, because you is a great way to start when you've gotten past that discovery and you're going to move into sort of that build value phase of the sell cycle.
Yeah. If I may, I'd like to revisit Benny's question, because, and by the way, Scott, I loved hearing that story again. It's been a while since I've heard the sales job that your daughter did on you, and the word picture that she used to sort of put you in, the mental state of what does success look like, right? But Benny, I want to go back to your question, because you asked an important one, which is what is the downside, or are there any downsides of this sort of this OCS? And I agree with what Scott said, but there are some cautions that we give some people, particularly when we talk about dropping the rope, because there's some things that drop the rope is not. Okay, drop the rope is not giving up. Okay, drop the rope is not being any less passionate about your solution, or being any less passionate about what you believe is the right thing for the customer, right? Drop the rope is not avoiding difficult conversations, right? Drop the rope is simply acknowledging that the person is free to make a decision, and recognizing that we can't force them into a place, right? And it's really how we approach the conversation. And again, I'm going to reference a workshop that I was doing recently with both SEs and AEs, and this question was literally put to me. It was from one of the AEs, and he kind of said, Chris, like, if we're and the reason it came up is that I use these concepts specifically in regards to the SE-AE relationship, as well as how we deal with customers. When AEs and SEs have, and we've talked about this before. I mean, Ramsey and I did a webinar a couple months ago when I talked about the differences between AEs and SEs. We're just fundamentally wired differently. We're going to have differences of opinions on certain things, and in many times passionately, right? So this idea of drop the rope and OCS, and priority applies to that relationship. But the question he posed to me is, well, Chris, if we're both sort of, dropping the rope and trying to take this OCS, like, what if we have a fundamental difference of opinion? Decisions are never going to get made. And I said, well, I said, I'm really glad you asked that question. And I sort of went through that whole thing. I'm not saying don't have difficult conversations. I'm not saying, right, don't be any less passionate. And in that specific case, I said, here's my rule. I call it sort of the 51-49 rule, right? I believe that the 51% of the vote, AEs have 51% of the vote, SEs have 49% of the vote, right? As an SE, I'm going to take a position. I'm going to tell you the way I think we should handle a demo or handle an engagement or the strategy or what have you, right? I give my AE the final vote, right? To me, he or she ultimately owns the account strategy, the opportunity strategy, right? And it's ultimately their head on the line. If like it doesn't close, it's ultimately going to be their head more than it is mine, right? I'm going to stand strong, and I'm going to take an OCS approach and share what I think is in the best interest of them and the customer. But at the end of the day, I give them the final vote. Does that, because I think that's an important point, right? Drop the rope doesn't mean, don't, just sort of roll over and play dead, so to speak, right? It just means we approach it, in a very other-centered way.
Well, and at the end of the day, selling is a numbers game on so many levels. You only have a certain amount of time that you can allocate to your career, right? You've got to have sleep and you've got to have personal time. And so with the hours that you have to work, you've got to be as prescriptive about the customers you choose to pursue as they are in choosing what vendors they partner with for different solutions. And so by being other-centered and getting what I used to call get the bad news out early, if this is not a fit, I want to know right now. We both should want to know right now, because who wants to waste time in a dance that has no chance, right? So let's figure that out pretty quickly. And so because you don't want to waste your time, Mr. Customer, and because I would like to help you if I can, if you just allow me 3 or 4 questions, I think I can kind of determine whether this is something that's going to be a fit for you. And if not, I can maybe give you some ideas of where you might want to go to solve this problem. It's a totally different conversation, and you don't waste time with clients you have no chance to succeed with. I mean, we go through this all the time. You guys probably have RFPs in your business, right? There are some RFPs that you look at and you just should not respond. There's no way you're winning. It was written for someone completely, some other company, and you're not going to win it. So why would you have anybody waste time filling that out? Well, because there's a chance. You're saying there's a chance. Probably not. Probably not. Not unless you can get a meeting, thoroughly understand their needs, and convince them that you are the most other-centered salesperson they've ever met. If they're not going to meet with you and you're going to fill out some paperwork, you're probably not winning that deal.
I'm starting to get the feeling that the time we allot for these podcasts are not enough, because I need another couple hours with you guys. Unfortunately, we do have to move on to the not so fire round, which we may have to do it in a 5-round succession. 4 questions we ask every guest. We've already asked Chris a couple of times. Maybe he'll change his answers today. But we'll start with you, Scott, and with question number 1. Benny?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm so curious to see what the answers are. I forgot to ask the question. Okay, so in your role, either as a trainer, but I think maybe just in your career so far, what is it that you've loved the most from the various roles that you've had, from the various interactions you've had with various stakeholders, with your customers, clients across the various contexts? What do you love the most about that? What have you loved, rather?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I haven't been so much as client facing, over the last several years, because I moved into leadership positions probably around the year, I don't know, 1997. So it's been a while. I'll answer that two ways. The pride of my career, as I look back on, APC was a huge chunk. I spent 23 years at APC and then Schneider. And I think just to sort of exacerbate my view on being other-centered, I feel like I've had that in me for quite some time, because my pride comes from all of the people I hired, promoted, and moved through the organization that I see successful on LinkedIn today. And I just look at it and go, I had some small part in that. Like I either gave them their start. I had a guy tell me this on LinkedIn the other day. He said, he's the president of a medical device company now. And I said, wow, you have come so far. And he's like, dude, thanks for not killing me when I was an idiot 22-year-old, or when I first started working for you. That's the kind of thing. And I think, for my 10 years of customer facing that I brought to those leadership roles, I think I learned a lot of what to do, but probably more importantly, what not to do. And I think I bring that every day to work here. I know exactly how I wouldn't lead. I know exactly how I would lead. I know exactly what doesn't work. And I know that being other-centered, both with your teammates and your customers, is the only way to do it. So I don't know if that answers your question directly, but that's kind of how I feel about what I love about my career so far.
Fair, I like that.
Chris, what about you?
You said that I've answered these questions before, but I don't remember answering the question. So
you want me to just re-edit those into this one?
You might just have to. No, the thing that comes to mind most readily is certainly in I'll say recent months, but certainly the past year for sure, is when I get a random email or LinkedIn message from someone who says, hey, I just read your book, or I just listened to one of your videos, and it had such an impact on me. It's changed the way I think about my job, or I've done these things and here's the result. I've had a couple people go through my programs recently as they were applying for and interviewing for jobs, and just to see that impact that I'm having on people and their professional lives and in many cases their personal lives is just unbelievably satisfying. I mean, I've told probably all of you at different times, like, very few people ever get rich from writing a book, right? I mean, the book, I love talking about the book, and it's one of the most satisfying things I've ever done. And it has very little financial value to me, but it just means everything to me when I get complete and total strangers reach out to me and tell me how much of an impact it made on their lives and their career.
Excellent. So Benny's sending me a note, which I'm not understanding. So I'm just going to let Benny ask that next question.
Okay.
Fair enough. Thanks. I'm a slow typer. So it's really good to know, and it's kind of really gratifying to be able to understand what it is that you guys both love about your respective careers so far, and obviously the outcomes of that. But on the flip side, normally we ask, what is it that you would change about your current role? But instead of that, what are some maybe preconceptions that are out there within sales teams or within organizations that you would change, with the flick of a wand? What are some preconceptions or maybe misconceptions would you like to change organizationally, or rather across an organization, that you've happened to see across a number of different companies, across different industries, whether they be ones that you're working within or ones that you're working with?
It's a great question. And I probably earlier in my career was a victim of this mindset, which is, when things are not going well in a selling organization, there's lots of things that could be at the root of that. And a lot of people will go, mostly salespeople would say, well, I've never been trained, right? I've never been trained on the product, or you never gave me any sales training. And I just want to say, and this is going to sound crazy from a sales training company, that sales training is not always the answer, right? So we talk about compelling events. right? So we talk when we go into an environment, we talk about compelling events. Like, what's happening that's causing this problem? Well, sometimes the leader changes, sometimes the market changes, sometimes there's been huge turnover and we've hired a bunch of people. There could be lots of reasons that sales forces are not performing. And I think the misconception is that sales training can solve all that. Well, sometimes it's a sales tool. Sometimes it's a better CRM. Sometimes it's just being better organized. And so maybe you need a coaching software or something else to organize the leadership. And none of that gets solved. You'll never find the right solution to your problem until you identify the problem and talk about it with people that are experts in solving that problem. And to me, that's the misconception that I see. I still see it today. And as a sales rep, I saw it. An other-centered salesperson will get to that. They will understand what the compelling event is, what's the actual problem we're trying to solve, and then they will decide whether they are able to solve it or whether they would make a recommendation to do something else. So I think that's how I'd answer that question.
Nice. Thanks. Chris?
I could probably spend an hour answering that question, but I narrowed, as Scott was talking, I narrowed it down to something very, very simple. I think the assumptions that people make about the people that they work with, particularly, and I'm going to focus on the AE-SE relationship, as you guys know, is one of my kind of core kind of focus areas. I think the assumptions and the misinterpretations that are made are enormous, and they're much bigger than people are even aware of. And if they could take a time, if they could slow down long enough to ask themselves, what assumption am I making about my sales counterpart in regards to what they're doing or what they're thinking or the insight that they have, right? And the interpretations that I'm making of what I'm seeing, and actually put that on the table, I think they would be amazed at some of the problems and miscommunication that would disappear. And I think they'd be amazed at what that would do to their performance and effectiveness in the field. As I run these workshops that involve AEs and SEs, it is just the lights that keep coming on, and literally I keep hearing time after time, we assumed this, or my assumption was always this, et cetera. So that would be the one thing. Like if I could show you the assumptions that you're making that you don't even recognize and how they are slowing you down, that would be what I would do differently.
Well, here's a good exercise. Write down everything that you think about your salesperson and then have 2 columns, fact and fiction.
Yeah.
Assumptions. And see which one. Most of it will land in the assumptions part.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right. Well, because Benny took my question, I'm going to take his. Is there a book you can recommend each other's? I don't know, Scott, have you written a book, or was it?
Not yet.
I can't write. Isn't that terrible for a marketing guy? I can't write.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll start with Chris. Is there another book that you would recommend to the SE world? Well, it could be about relationships or anything, really.
So it's interesting. I think I've already recommended Instant Influence, which is one of my favorite books. And so, and I think I may have even, if you've asked me this twice, I may have even mentioned the Speed of Trust by Stephen R. Covey. One that I read recently is ironically is The Power of Habits, and that's a fantastic book because it really breaks down why we develop habits, right? And really how to change habits. And not probably by no coincidence, my book is obviously the 6 Habits. So, but I think understanding it's a book that really helps understand ourselves and just human nature better, and how habits are developed, and more importantly, how they can be changed. So, in fact, while Scott is speaking, I'll see if I can pull it up and I'll tell you exactly who the author is, because I think I've got it right here. But
Yeah,
I
I
think
mean,
it's
my
called The
personal
Power Hour.
favorite is, of course, The 6 Habits of Highly Effective Sales Engineers. I mean, I don't know how you don't have that on your bookshelf. If you're listening to this, you just have to have it.
Thank you
But-
for that, sir.
But yeah, for sure. I like, it kind of goes along with what we're talking about, you know, that everybody in all walks of life in any profession is in sales. People don't want to admit it, but people do have to influence other people to make money and to do what they do. And so this book is called To Sell is Human: The Surprising Truth About Moving Others, by Daniel Pink. And it's a really good, you know, not too academic, but it does have a lot of big words in there that scare guys like me off. But it's really a great, it's a great way to think about it. No matter what job you're in, you have to influence people. And so To Sell is Human is my recommendation.
And since you don't have a book, you do have a podcast that I was a guest on.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have about the same amount of fun as we had on this podcast, but we do it with a beer in our hands. It's called Ales with Aslan. Although there is an S in front of the ales, which creates Sales with Aslan, a little play on words. But Ales with Aslan can be found on any of your podcast platforms. You can find on Spotify and Apple. And we once a week we talk about real life selling problems. A lot of stuff on the pandemic lately. We've done we're not quite to where you are, 64 episodes now. So, but lots of great content out there that I hope people will go listen to and take a shot at subscribing.
Just so you know, I was a little tipsy by the end of our show.
Well, you had that 7.8 ABV, I think.
Yeah, I can't even remember. I don't remember what I had.
That's right.
Well, and by the way, I was about to go and run and get a beer before our podcast, and then I realized, wait a minute, this isn't Ales with
Aslan.
Ramsey doesn't do the whole beer thing.
Well,
I was a little disappointed, to be honest with you. I was gonna have one anyways.
Yeah,
You know, I don't write books, but I do write blogs. And if you're interested in a perspective on older guys like Chris and me, I wrote a blog about what I want to do with the fourth quarter of my career that's up on my LinkedIn page that I think would be helpful to people as they move through their career, because not every step of it's going to be perfect. But every step of it is a brick in the road that will get you to where you end up. And I look back and I wouldn't replace any of the bricks. But I'm happy that I made this transition from corporate America into this small company where I feel like I'm making a big impact. And so that blog is an interesting read if anybody's interested. It's called What to Do with the Fourth Quarter of My Career.
Okay, I'll have a link to that on the show notes. Again, show 119.
Excellent.
Final question, or question before last, technically speaking. What separates great SEs from the not so great ones? Chris, you've answered this a couple of times, so I'm going to ask you first, if we can keep it a little bit short. And then Scott will have the time to think about that. But Scott, your question would be about sales.
Yeah. Well, and just in the interest of the conversation today, I mean, I think, developing some of the skills and mindset really of what we've been talking about, which is other-centered selling. I know, at least on one of your shows, one of the things that we talked about is even me early in my career as a sales engineer, one of the mistakes I made was, I had such a big ego because I was such an expert in my solution that I felt like I could walk into any situation, just airdrop me in and I'm good. I'm the expert, right? Yep. And I found out very quickly that I'm not always the smartest, guy in the world, and I'm not always as good as I think I am. So, and I just think that that's part of OC, this whole other-centered notion. So I think becoming comfortable with sales and then recognizing that really to serve is to sell. That's one of the things that really starts to elevate a sales engineer into that level of mastery.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would answer it sort of this way. I mean, people don't trust other people in this world today. And so they're natively, when you approach anybody about anything, they're, if you're watching the podcast, you see my arms are crossed. They're naturally closed to anything you have to say. They're either closed to you as a person because you're a sales rep or a sales engineer, or they're closed to the subject matter that you're about to, take on. And so what I would say is we call it the cornerstone principle. This is easy to remember. It's a great word picture. You know, when we're farming, so when you go plant your garden in the spring, you focus on two things. You've got the seed, and then you've got the soil where you're gonna plant. And you have to have very good seed, which is a sales rep's message, but you also have to have very fertile soil to be able to plant that in. If you're throwing seeds on baked Georgia clay, you are never going to germinate a seed, right? But if you take the time to soften the soil and mix it with some great, we have lobster compost up here in New England. That stuff works like miracle. And then you throw the seeds in that and water it appropriately, your seed will germinate and grass will grow. Same thing in a selling career. If you take the time to stop selling and focus on receptivity of your customer, that soil, make sure they're receptive to your message before you start dropping your value proposition on them, you will have a lot more success. And I hope that word picture resonates with you and makes some sense to you.
It does.
Well, I don't know about the baked Georgia clay because his
no.
audience is largely Canada. So, maybe like the frozen,
Tundra.
frozen tundra of Winnipeg or something.
That's very good. I like
We
that.
used to refer to them as Losapeg in hockey. So
I don't know. You still refer to them like that?
What's that?
The show will not air in Winnipeg. All right.
I was going to say, or he's going to lose all his viewership in Winnipeg. For sure.
I apologize. Yeah.
Oh, no worries. My audience, they're a very humorous bunch. I hope. Otherwise, they would hate my jokes. Anyways, all right. Where can people, if they want to reach out to you or learn more about Aslan, where can they do that, Scott?
Yeah, absolutely. Check out the podcast, Sales with Aslan, with the S in front. Our website is got a lot of great information to better. That's what I do for a living is keep that up to date. aslantraining.com. We've got lots of great, we talk about who we serve. We talk about what we offer. We talk about our process. And there's a great blog about the genesis of Aslan, where we all came from. This idea of the Aslan the Lion and the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or the Chronicles of Narnia, however you want to code that. But Aslan the Lion was an other-centered leader, an other-centered king. And that's how we kind of built our company and chose that name. So go learn about us there and give us a shout if we can help.
Awesome. And Demo Dr. White?
Yeah, I mean, you guys have, probably know the book is available on Amazon. And actually, I have a new free offer on my website. So if anybody goes to www.demodoctor.com, yes, and there's the book, /free chapter. If you don't feel like spending a few bucks on the book, you can actually get you can download the first chapter for free and, see if you like a few of the words that I have to say without spending a penny. So, and otherwise, Ramsey, again, I'll just congratulate you. 119 episodes.
Amazing.
I know you've got a huge following and more importantly, a huge fan base. And there's a lot of us who have a great deal of respect for you and Benny and the job that you guys do. So thanks again for having us. And, on behalf of SEs literally across the globe, thanks for what you do. It's just awesome.
Thank you. Keep going. Well, actually,
don't stop, Chris. We're not done.
I appreciate the time we spent together, guys. I know we were planning on half hour, but we just couldn't stop. Thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it. And we'll see you soon, hopefully.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, guys.
All right. This brings us to the end of the show. Did you notice that I was rocking an SENY t-shirt during that call?
I did, yeah, actually.
Yeah, so Akshat from SENY sent it to me. He's like, Ramsey, what size are you? I'm like, as many X's as you can get. Like, is one X enough? I'm like, no, that's enough for my thigh.
That was a well-fitting shirt. I thought it fit really well.
Well, he got me like triple X.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
So it worked out.
Fine.
Yeah. But other than the shirt, this was I really enjoyed my conversation. I said that at the intro. I really enjoyed my conversation with Scott Cassidy and Chris White. And I'm just saying, like, it feels unnatural saying their last names like that, but recognition. So if you want to check them out on LinkedIn or whatever, check out the show notes at wetheses.com/show119. What did you think of the show?
Yeah, I think that there's so many cool things about this one. Like, there's so many things we could take out of it. One would be, the first and foremost, perhaps the dynamic between both Chris and Scott, that's not something that you could just, make up on the spot unless you're, I don't even know. That's like, there was such an organic chemistry between the two of them that has been nurtured over years and years and years. And in fact, if you want to really see how much this has been nurtured, jump on the show notes and you might find a little treat there. But I think the content as well, I mean, I think Aslan training, or just like speaking to the methodology that's used for Aslan training, and speaking to the methodology of serving those around you was so cool and just eye-opening and so valuable as well. Yeah, there's a lot of things. I mean, speaking about OCS, as you were talking about earlier, a lot of things that to take out of the show.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of sales training is dedicated to process and do this, then that. This is what you say. This is how you ask the question. And I'm not familiar with Aslan's training. Like, I haven't attended any of their training. I've listened to their podcast, but I'm not familiar. But the conversation was like, just be human. Like,
Right.
care first, right? And Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah.
And he talks about like serving. Like, if you want to ask, the best way to make a sale is to serve. That's why he has a book called Jab, 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 Left Hook or Cross or whatever, where he talks about like the jabs are you're just giving, and the hook, you're asking. That's when you ask for stuff. But you have to do so much jabbing first before you do the hook, before you ask for anything in return. Like, kind of like the podcast. We do so many podcasts. We put out so many podcasts, and then we request, hey guys, leave us a rating or review, right? We're not mad if they don't do that, although it'll be very beneficial to the channel and the podcast, but we are giving, we're earning the request, basically.
Right. No, I love that analogy. That's a really good way to go about it. Like, you build credibility, not even from a professional perspective, but from, like you said earlier, a human perspective. And you're giving the opportunity for those around you, I guess, rather, for you to be able to help and serve. The only way you could really do that effectively is to know what it is that the audience really wants, or what it is that who you're serving really wants. And so to give them the opportunity to really tell you this is so powerful for sales, because hopefully you're coming from a good-natured place of really wanting to help. But you're coming into it in such a way that allows you to find out exactly what it is you need to do to really help. And I don't know. I just love how human that is, how natural that is, and how and also how helpful that is as well.
And speaking about their chemistry, I feel like great SE sales teams have that chemistry, and they develop in a short period of time. We don't have years. There's a lot of turnover when it comes to salespeople. We don't have years to develop that chemistry. But if we can develop it fairly quickly, we can become a very impressive team.
True. I wonder if, the chemistry they had between the two of them, and to your point exactly, like how much of an influence that specific relationship between Chris and Scott had towards, I believe it might be the second habit that Chris has around partnering, or having strong partnerships.
I don't think they worked together before. I think their work together, like they never overlapped within companies.
Got it. Okay. Sorry.
I think they were friends in high school, and then they lost track of each other up until recently, and they picked it up. But you can tell their chemistry, like they're working together now. Right. But like you can tell their chemistry is on par with any good SE sales teams that I've seen.
Valid. Yeah. No, I agree. I'd buy from them. They had a great chemistry, a great dynamic.
Well, they do have a course, Ales on Aslan. You can go check it out. Benny?
Yeah. Yes. I will.
All right, man. I think that's it for today. Appreciate everybody's time. Appreciate you guys listening. So here's the hook. If you guys are finding this podcast useful to you and you think it'll be helpful to other people, if you're driving, don't do this. But if you're not, just send a text to someone you think would be interested in this. Send them a link. Send them on my email. I don't know what they would do with that, but if you want, I'm happy to chat with anybody. All right. Do you want to take us off? Take us out?
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess that's a good closing statement. Oh, also, again, anybody that hasn't already known about it, we have the whole No SC Left Behind initiative. So if you've been affected by COVID, and you're either looking to get into the role of sales engineering based on what you were doing beforehand, or perhaps you're already a sales engineer looking to looking to find your next place, or maybe you're even looking to hire sales engineers. Things are slowly starting to, find its pace back to somewhat normalness, I guess, depending where you are. Also, I suppose. But do jump on the We the Sales Engineers website. We have a whole section dedicated directly for the No SC Left Behind initiative, and you'll be able to schedule an interview to essentially get yourself known and get yourself out there. And anything we can do to help you guys kind of carve out the next path in your career, that's what we're here to do. So jump on there, and let's all help each other out.
Yeah, that's one of the jobs we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, exactly.
Before I open this up for you, Benny, to start another conversation, for Benny, this is Ramsey signing off.